Hello, everybody. We are back with more Nintendo Week. I'm your host, Colin McIsaac, and I'm joined, as always, by Alex Plant.
I have not been cancelled.
Ben Lamoureux.
I have also not been cancelled, thankfully.
And we are talking about Project M. It has recently been cancelled. Development stopped immediately. They removed all the download links from their websites. Project M, of course, is a really, really popular Smash Bros. Brawl mod that makes the game a little bit more like Melee, a little bit more balanced, and includes a lot of fan content. You know, they've got a bunch of past stages remastered in HD. They've got new stages. They had, like, Bowser's Castle and stuff. They had a ton of awesome costumes. They brought back Mewtwo and Roy. There was so much stuff in Project M. It was really an incredible endeavor, and it just stopped out of the blue. People say it's for fear of legal action. They caught wind that Nintendo was planning to strike down the hammer as soon as they released another update, and they didn't need to do a cease and desist because of certain Japanese copyright laws, so they were worried that, you know, if they released anything more, then, you know, they would just be ruined, and, you know, they wouldn't be warned. The latest build leaked online, though. It included Lyn, Isaac, and Knuckles as playable characters, and Knuckles. And Knuckles. And Knuckles. And you know, they weren't completed yet, but they were in development, and that could be part of why they were worried, because what if Isaac is DLC in Smash 4, for example? Then Nintendo would have a monetary incentive to strike down Project M.
We'll see. If they include Knuckles, then Sega is not going to be able to make massive profits anymore.
Yeah, they're 10%. That's why.
Yes.
That's why.
It's all Sega.
So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on for Project M.
Yeah, and this is something that's been... Project M has been in development for years, and it has just such a vibrant community. There's almost as many Project M fans as there are Smash fans. I mean, that's a huge exaggeration. That's hyperbole to the furthest extent. But, I mean, there's a lot of people that play Project M. But not anymore.
Certainly more than ever played Brawl, right?
Well, I don't know about that.
I mean, yeah, no. But, you know, there's just so much weird stuff surrounding this cancellation. Yeah, I hear the team was a huge development team with a lot of people. I've heard that there was a lot of, like, internal drama going on. So people were thinking originally maybe that's why they canceled it, and maybe it did sort of play into why they canceled it. But I think probably the biggest question, because I would imagine none of us know enough about the details behind sort of the cancellation and the I suppose you could say drama surrounding Project M to be able to talk about these events specifically. But the bigger question I think that's important to ask is, should Nintendo be okay with stuff like this? And where is the line to draw when mods start doing stuff like this?
I think the easy answer is yes, Nintendo should be okay with stuff like this. Modding has been around forever, and it certainly hasn't caused most of the games from which mods are made to go under. Obviously, people have invested money in the IP that game companies create, have invested money in the gameplay that they create, and even if someone's sort of iterating on that in their free time and releasing it to people, that doesn't necessarily take profits away from the game companies.
Right.
Yeah, and, you know, if anything, it keeps interest in the series going because, like I said, it's got just such a vibrant community around it. And you look at, like, Steam and everything, and one of the big draws to Steam is that there's just awesome mods for just about any game you can conceive. And obviously you don't quite get that same experience on consoles, but this was, you know, probably the biggest mod that Nintendo's ever experienced, the biggest mod fan base Nintendo's ever experienced.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, like, when I was waiting for Smash 4 for about a year and a half, maybe even 2, I was playing Project M because I was way tired of Brawl. Project M brought in new moves, it brought in Mewtwo and Roy, it brought in new stages, everything. I mean, it felt like a new Smash game, and the content was sustained, it was really interesting and fascinating and fun to play, and I think that you guys are right, you know, there is value in having these things and keeping them around, and I think it does certainly get really tricky when these mods are adding in new characters like Lyn and Isaac that the original game doesn't have any rights for. Well, I mean, it's Nintendo, but still.
The original game doesn't have the assets to compete with the mod, is what you're saying, I think. They haven't added in all the characters people want, they haven't added in stages people want, and so this mod is adding things that aren't making it into the main game.
Right, and I think that, you know, that is obviously something that Nintendo wants to be wary about because, you know, what if they want to put Saffron City in Smash Bros. 4 and Project M takes a little bit of the excitement away? Obviously, I don't think Project M did take any of the excitement away. I think Project M was very much its own sort of insular thing. And I think a lot of people, you know, surely there were some who say Project M's a lot better, more competitive than Smash 4, more interesting, I like it better. But I think that community is so small compared to how many people are playing Nintendo's official products that it shouldn't be, worth their attention. And obviously, this is all just rumors. We don't know that Nintendo was planning to strike at any moment, but I think that Nintendo should embrace stuff like this a lot more openly.
Well, assuming that Nintendo was, on the verge of legal action and they were forced to take Project M down, or basically be screwed from the way it was described. If Nintendo's worried about this hurting their sales, like, people buy Project M, so now they don't have any need to buy the new Smash, or now they won't buy the DLC for the new Smash if they already have it in Project M, etc. I think they're going to lose a lot more sales by just antagonizing the entire Project M community of thousands of fans by just, removing it from the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I feel like, I think Nintendo's lucky, because if these sort of rumors and allegations are true that they were planning to strike, I think Nintendo's very lucky that they didn't end up doing it, because this generation, goodwill is the only thing Nintendo's got going. And if they shut down Project M, I mean, first of all, look how furious the internet was, the whole internet, when Project M was canceled. Now imagine if Nintendo was the reason it was canceled, and Nintendo antagonizing not only the sort of competitive community, but the fans who are passionate enough to make this game to iterate on what they love purely because they love it.
And Nintendo has already, upset a pretty big chunk of the fan base, and even more so the potential fan base, with their YouTube policies. So
I know, my God,
you've already upset the streamers and the Let's Players and the millions of people that subscribe to them. And now, if Nintendo was involved in Project M being taken down, now you're throwing a rock at the modding community as well.
Yeah. Which, as Alex said, that's becoming such a big part of the community of other types of games, especially PC gaming. That's a huge draw, and Valve and a lot of other companies are saying, hey, yeah, you're welcome to play mods and buy the games, and then you can do it. Go ahead. And I think Nintendo would certainly benefit from embracing that kind of similar attitude. And again, I think they're lucky that they did not end up taking the step to shut it down.
It's really sort of stunning to see the difference between how Nintendo reacts to mods and how the PC developers have historically reacted. So if you look at a game like Warcraft, back in the day, Warcraft didn't have online play. And in fact, online play was first introduced to Warcraft through a mod that someone created that tricked the local multiplayer into letting you, or the LAN connection, to letting you play over the internet. And Blizzard wound up approaching the people who created the mod and saying, this is great, will you bundle in the thing that you've created with our game? And could you imagine Nintendo approaching a project like Project M and saying, people love your content, we want your content in Smash 4, not in
they
your
should,
Brawl
but I
mod?
would never be able to imagine it.
That just seems like it's a successful pattern that's already been done in the PC space. Another good example is Dota. Dota was a popular Warcraft mod, and now it's
an official game.
A sequel that's an official game.
Yeah, not only that, it's one of the most popular games in the world. The tournaments for it are for millions of dollars every year.
Yeah, and that came specifically because the company embraced what the fans were doing and changing about their games and said, this is fantastic, let's make it official.
Right, exactly. And it's just sad that people who mod Nintendo games they have this fear that they're going to get shut down, rather than this hope that they're going to get scooped up by Nintendo and asked to build stuff for the fans.
Yeah. And I think it's especially disheartening when you see stuff like Project M. You see, back when they would, release new versions of it and they would put out trailers for, hey, these new stages, hey, these new costumes. People would get so excited to see that content in Smash. That should serve as an indicator to Nintendo that people want this content in Smash Bros. And that should set off a little light in their heads that says, hey, let's make this content, instead of, hey, let's shut down other people who are trying to make it and then just bring Dreamland back the way it looked like on Nintendo 64.
Yeah.
Because, they were like remaking stages like Saffron City. They haven't even brought the old Saffron City into Smash 4, and they're obviously never going to. Or they're not going to remake Saffron City.
Right, after playing the Project M version of Hyrule Castle, I was disappointed when Nintendo just released the old Hyrule Castle verbatim.
Exactly. I mean, and especially, I think, with stuff like costumes, because that is one of the biggest things, I think, that's interesting about Project M. Stages, too, of course. There's like a great Wario Land stage, and there's some really interesting stuff there. But especially with costumes, which is such a big fan service service element of Smash, which is largely a fan service game already. It's so strange to see them, again, not antagonizing because we don't know that's what happened, but it would be extremely strange to see them antagonizing that.
And if there wasn't at least significant concern over legal action, then they wouldn't have pulled all the links and, you know, been so secretive about it. So whether or not it was actually warranted, whether there was actually legal action coming or they were just getting really paranoid, remains to be seen. But clearly they were pretty terrified. You don't take something that you've spent years working on and just try to erase all traces of it from the internet.
Well, yeah, members of the community sort of came out. One of them posted on Facebook a long post. You know, they were saying the dev team was talking to a lawyer about, you know, what kinds of things they can do to navigate the kind of modding situation that Project M is in. And the conclusions that the lawyer basically told them was, you have to just shut everything down. There's no way you can navigate this. You need to just stop immediately and pray to God that they don't do anything.
I think the really sad thing about how this all shook out is that these were people that were really passionate about creating stuff for Nintendo fans with Nintendo content. And now that they've been driven from this modding scene, they're going to go on to create their own stuff. Their own stuff, which may or may not also be free, but which now will definitely be in some way competing with what Nintendo's doing. And given the track record the Project M team has with creating content that people that play Nintendo games love, I think we can imagine that they'll go on to create more stuff that Nintendo fans love. And if Nintendo really sees things like this as a threat in some way, which we're saying that we don't necessarily think that they do, but they have had a history of shutting down projects like this, they're kind of creating their own worst enemy.
That's
I mean, we
really
see
interesting
Nintendo released something like Nintendo released a game like Mario Maker, which shows that they saw the idea of fan-made Mario Maker as a threat and they wanted to make their own. So by driving your most dedicated, passionate fans away, you're basically creating ammunition that can be used against you.
And I think a lot of them, too, it's disheartening. I think a lot of them are just going to be dissuaded from doing that kind of stuff in the future. Like, I know, for example, I do a lot of, like, music remixes and stuff. I love Nintendo music, and I love changing it and imagining it in new ways. And for a while, I was looking at Project M and thinking, wow, this is incredible. I would love to... I mean, Smash Bros. Is part of the reason that I love changing the music in these ways. I love sort of collecting Nintendo musics and creating this sort of chronicle and this list of things that are reimagined in interesting ways, and that's exactly what Project M was doing. And for a while I was thinking, hey, this is exactly what I would love to do. I would love to be the music director for Smash Bros, and this is a really easy, interesting step. And I can't imagine if I had applied to the team and made it in and you know, ultimately everything was getting shut down by Nintendo, that there is all this fear surrounding the legal status of this stuff. I know I, for one, wouldn't be going on to make different content. I would be saying, if I can't make Nintendo content, I don't want to do this anymore. And that's so sad for people who are interesting and creative and doing interesting things.
Yeah, and that sort of drives back to the history of this industry, where the people who started off making games were people who loved playing games. So if you don't kind of let the fans have their way in, and you don't let them explore their sort of development journey in their own way, how are they ever going to become the next generation of game creators? Yeah,
and Nintendo is this company who, I mean, I think it's safe to say that people love Nintendo and Nintendo IP so much more than any other company around. And so they're the ones who are going to have the biggest, you know, sort of nostalgia-driven, fan-driven effort behind them. And if Nintendo's trying to squash this out, then all the benefits that all these other companies are getting from those kinds of efforts, you know, Nintendo would have far and away the biggest benefits, and they're actively trying to eliminate that, whereas other companies are encouraging it.
Yeah, you know, definitely, like you said, you know, Nintendo has just the richest library of IP, and a lot of people have, you know, grown up inspired by Nintendo to make games. But when Nintendo doesn't have particularly great relationship with its fans or with developers, then you start to see, you know, games that are perfect for the Nintendo audience popping up elsewhere instead. Like, for example, Axiom Verge, which is just clearly an homage to Metroid, but Sony came in and snatched that up.
Yeah, and so Axiom Verge, you look at stuff like Undertale has been hugely popular among people who especially like Earthbound and Mother. You know, these kinds of games are emerging in other spaces that are not Nintendo's, and
Nintendo's no longer really competing in a lot of those spaces either. They're not making a new 2D Metroid. They're not making a new Earthbound. They're not making
Both huge mistakes, by the way.
Right. They're not making F-Zero, like we were talking about earlier.
Although that is on Wii U, but your point still stands.
I mean, it doesn't have to be on Wii U.
Right.
Yeah, the barriers to making games are falling more and more all the time. And in particular, the kinds of games Nintendo makes, because they don't tend to make these big budget games that require a massive studio, which is sort of why I brought that up earlier. Anyone can make a kind of Super Mario Brothers style game now, because 2D platformers are so easy to make. They're so easy to make. Nintendo made a maker for 2D Mario games. So, at what point is Nintendo going to continue to be the special company that they are if they're, driving so many of the people who could have been creating the next big Nintendo game to now create the next big not Nintendo game, and one that maybe surpasses the games that Nintendo's currently making?
Sounds like we're wrapping up, so everybody, thank you so much for listening. This is the Endo Nintendo Week for today. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to us on iTunes or subscribe to us on YouTube at Gamnesia TV for bite-sized discussions from the show. And please head to iTunes to leave us a review. It really helps with visibility, so we greatly appreciate it. We're up to 46, we're aiming for 50 and 60 and, however many we can get. We love reading what you guys have to say. We appreciate it so much. We're so thankful that you guys are listening. So if you like what we're doing, please consider helping out. If you have feedback for Nintendo Week, please send it to colin@gamnesia.com, or you can find me on Twitter at Colin McIsaac. And remember to send in your questions about Nintendo, about our show. We love engaging with you guys, and we read them and talk about them here on the show, so it's a great way to get involved. Again, that's colin@gamnesia.com and at Colin McIsaac, ColinMciSaac. And Alex, they can find you on Twitter?
You can find me on Twitter at Legend of Lex.
If you can't wait till next week for more of our stuff, you can head to Gamnesia.com to see more gaming news as it happens. We've got Sony, Microsoft, Indie, you name it, and even Nintendo news that we didn't have the time to discuss on this week's show. As we head out, please enjoy a remix of Super Mario World's castle theme, as created by Garrett Williamson for Project M. Thank you all so much for listening, and we hope you have another great week.